So in PixLR, bottom left toolbox, top right adjustment. First thing we're going to do is the saturation. It's a colorful image. We want this to be in a black and white, or we want this to be a black and white image. So we're going to take saturation all the way down. So minus 100 on saturation. You'll see it at the top. It says minus 100. Makes it into our black and white photo. We want it to be really dramatic, though. We want to make this look like she's emerging from the shadows, emerging from this darkness. So in order to do that, go to lightness and go down to minus 50. Somewhere around there, ballpark. You can go a little bit further if you want. Minus 50 makes it a lot more dramatic. It's going to be a very dark drawing. These are meant to be really quick rendered drawings because we are using black paper. We're utilizing the shadows. We're making the paper work for us. Then over here, we're going to go to contrast to make it a little bit more dramatic. Contrast, we're going to go to plus 50. So saturation, minus 100. Lightness, minus 50. Contrast, plus 50. And then brightness, right next to contrast, we're going to go plus 50. This is going to be a very dramatic, low-key, high contrast, noir style drawing. She looks like she's like covered in shadows. Saturation, minus 100. Lightness, minus 50. Contrast and brightness, plus 50. Check mark, done, save image. Contrast and brightness. And this is what we're going to work with. All right. We've got Conti crayons. These are very, very soft pastels, very, very much so like charcoal. And we are going to focus on shape, chunks of shape as opposed to lines. In order to do that, in order to make you feel like you have to work with shapes, break it down. Don't be able to hold the Conti crayon like it was a pencil. You want to be able to hold it with 2 fingers, and that's it. We don't want it to be something that you're tempted to hold it as a pencil or like a pencil. No tripod grips for this. Break it down, yeah. Break it down into thirds, quarter it if you want. Break it in half if you're worried about it. It's going to feel a little unfamiliar. It's just like your graphite chunks, but a lot softer. Before we move on with any of this, a little bit goes a long way with your Conti crayons. So a little bit of white will blend out quite far. It is a very soft thing. So do not sit here and color too much. We are focusing on our core highlights more than anything. And then we blend those core highlights into our darker midtones. When you're looking at Mary, or not Mary, St. Teresa, it works really well on the Elmo here. Simple shapes. I've got a slanted mushroom shape. I've got 2 white dots, a wedge, and a wedge around the nose. We are going to focus on those shapes, okay, for the entire drawing. So it's just angles and chunks of shape. If you draw small, you have to draw a lot more. You guys know that draw to fill the paper. If you draw small, you'll have to show the shoulder. You'll have to show all the drapery down there. Is that a bad thing? No, but a lot of times less is more. We're focusing on this portrait. We're in the portrait module after all. So it is apropos. First thing I'm going to do is draw this mushroom. You guys all see that mushroom here? Stem, mushroom, or the brow and the nose. But don't think of it as a brow and the nose. A lot of times when you think of exactly what it is, you become a little paralyzed. It's a lot easier to draw this mushroom shape or color in this mushroom shape than it is to draw a brow and a nose. I'm gonna pick a spot on my paper, look at the angle of my mushroom or angle of the nose, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. The tip of my nose at the left side is the center of a clock. The angle of the nose is going to 4 o'clock. So there's the tip of my nose. The angle of the nose here, something like that-ish. And the bottom of the mushroom, where my brow is, I'm looking at how much space I have from this point to this edge. It's not all the way up here. It's not all the way down here. Find this rhythm. A little bit inside of the nose, so somewhere about here. Look at the shape of this backwards L, this angle here. Look at the shape of this shape there. And I can piece it together. A little bit higher. Probably going to go a little bit wider, a little bit higher. Not a whole lot of pastel on my paper. When I blend, my suggestion, instead of using a blending stump, welcome to art class, get your fingers a little bit dirty. Use the pad of your fingers and the pad of your palm for broader spots. This is going to give you a really soft edge. Blends out pretty far. I'm going to look at that shape in comparison to my reference. I know that I've got a little bit more of an angle here. Just observationally, we'll find a lot of rhythm. So I've got this rhythm coming up here, and then pretty dramatic change in direction. And I have a pretty significant bump here. And this is Artigan paper. It's partially recycled paper. It's a really good heavyweight paper. There's a lot of tooth to it, a little different than your Bristol board in your sketchbooks. That's a smooth paper. This has a tooth to it. So it really sits on top of the peaks of the paper. And then you still have these little nooks and crannies to give you some value. So on the screen, it looks really, really bright. It is not nearly as bright as what it is on the screen. And on this, just looking at my shape, I'm going to take off this top edge. It erases really easily. If you don't have your kneaded eraser, you can use any of your other erasers. Avoid using the tough stick right now just because we're not focusing on line. If you have to use your soap eraser, your gum eraser, it's just going to leave a lot of debris. That's why I recommend using your kneaded eraser. It doesn't leave any of the shavings. All right, I got my mushroom. Go a little bit higher with it on this side. There's a lot of excess stuff that you can erase it off or you can use it. Doesn't matter. All right, underneath my eyelid here, underneath my brow line, this part of my mushroom, gotta leave a little bit of space for that shadow of the top of the eye or the underneath part of the brow, whatever it is. Got a little bit of space. So that's going to be the top of my eye, furthest west coast of my eye. Look at the shape of the shadow here. Got somewhere around there. This is going to be for left eye. So I'll thin it out. I don't care that it goes a little bit further than the width of my eye. That will all get changed here pretty soon. Same thing over here. How much negative space? Got that. When it comes to the bottom of my eye, I like finding a rhythm from the edge of this shadow, or where it's going to be here, this highlight shadow. I'm pretty confident in that angle right there. I can go straight across. Say that that's going to be the bottom of my eyelid here. And all I'm doing there is looking at my reference and saying, all right, I've got this angle right there. If I have that, come back down to my paper. I'm a little off. And that's going to connect from the nose. We're a little bit around here, almost the center of, a little bit shy of center of the nose. Like I said, you can easily erase out. Got the angle of my far eyelid. That kept going. It's gonna connect with this shadow on this far right side. Underneath my eye here, I've got a little bit of a highlight under this negative space. So focus on your core core highlights there and drag around. Then I have a little bit of a shadow again, a little bit of a wedge. And then I have the big highlight like I did for my forehead of my cheek. This is the wedge shape. And I'm going to use this to really map out the rest of my face. There's a lot of pastel here, softening out my edges. If you need to add more, none of this is working, or none of the, I can't blend it out any further. Go back to your core highlight, add a little bit, reload. It kind of makes this really wide Y shape, almost a T. So arch, diagonal. As long as I can blend out those lines, like I said earlier in the first classes, there's a lot of really hard lines here. This should be really, really soft gray tones without heavy edges. We'll add the edges in later. I'm going to go ahead and do the other cheek too, and then we'll subtract the nose. So I've got my eye, I've got the tip of my nose, and I've got a wedge that goes along with this wedge. So just a sideways looking to see. Soften out my edges. Go underneath my nose a little bit. I'll be able to erase that out. Got to trust the process with this low-key high contrast stuff. Now with my nose, if I'm looking at the shapes of my shadows, got the tip of my nose at that original line. This shadow really goes all the way up, creates almost a musical note looking thing over here. If you're using your kneaded eraser, make sure that you're cleaning it up a bit. So a hard edge. And then I've got I need to figure out where the bottom there is. This becomes like a trapezoid, like a slanted trapezoid. How much from here to here do I have? I can compare it to the width of the bridge of the nose. There's a little bit more than one. So this distance from here to here, a little bit more than one. Say the bottom of my nose is there, the bottom of the shadow. I've got to change an angle from this hard line here. So this is coming out this way, and it changes pretty slightly. And then this shadow will really just keep going around. I'm not worried about too much that's going on in this mid-tone right here just yet. Where I have that hard edge, take my finger, soften it out a bit. Know that it's going to round off, but that will be a lot dictated by the highlight that we add on the edge of the nostril. Round off over here. Maybe a bump towards your lip. So the bottom of this shadow is really the top of your top lip. You can see that highlight in your reference, this Cupid's bow shape. Appropriate reference for the ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Or I want to have that nostril. I've got this angle, the edge of my nose. Makes a dramatic turn there, just a little bit of a line. You add the line, soften it out. You don't want it to be super vivid. You can always take a little off. At this point, I'm not going to draw in the Cupid's bow, the top of the top lip. I am going to try and soften out a little bit more of this highlight underneath so that I can work subtractively to create the interior of my mouth and the top of the bottom lip. I'm looking at angles. It's kind of hard to see on the Elmo, but I have an angle here, makes a really wide V shape. So I'm looking at the shape of that shadow, or the shape of that highlight rather, underneath the nose. Got this angle from top left to bottom right, or top right to bottom left. Comes in a little bit and then jets out for the opening of the mouth. And it's really hard to see on the Elmo. Try to adjust that so you can see it. You're creating this angle so that your negative space, which is her skin, and creating this kind of Groucho Marx looking sideways or slanted mustache. This shape. This is where if you wanted to outline it, take your tough stick, arch here. Just like I did over here with this wedge, I'm gonna do the same thing right here. Look at that angle. Hard arch, arch. Say the gap is about here. So once I have that outlined, I can start to subtract. Highlights on your bottom lip, they're pretty stark against the black of the inside of the mouth. A little bit further left. I'm just going to add a little bit. I don't want to draw the entire thing right now. Just add a little bit. I know that it flattens out on the bottom, and it kind of makes this wildebeest looking horn shape up top. There's a really defined shadow underneath her bottom lip. If you don't have the bow shape there, we'll use the white charcoal later to do that. So it's kind of mustachy looking shape. Creates a little bit of the highlight of her top lip. We'll add that in with the pencil also. Bottom of her bottom lip, heavy shadow. It kind of makes this wonky looking B shape. You can't see it. You can always add more. We're going to add a little bit of pastel for the chin anyway. The chin, we've got negative space, the shadow rather. Chin will start about here. It's going to blend out and connect with my shadow over there, or my highlight rather. This all keeps coming down, connects there. I can refine my shape after. A little bit thinner of a shadow over here. Highlight rather. All right. The habit is a lot easier to do because you have a lot of room to screw up. I'm going to start eliminating some of my shadows though. looking at the diagonal from here to here, that's all covered in shadow. If you have a hard edge, you can use your kneaded eraser to stamp it out along your edge. Creates a little bit of texture. It is a statue after all, so you can have a little bit of texture. This shadow gets really close to my lip shadow. Soften out your edge. Thins her out a little bit. So it doesn't look like a solid geometric shape. You want it to be soft. A little high on that eye. High on the, my angle's a bit off there. That's fine. All right, the habit, easy. We've got a little bit of change in direction here. You have a lot of opportunity to kind of screw up and it looked fine. That's the great thing about fabric. We know this from our fabric studies. Got a little bit of shadow, and from about here to here, we got a line, and then it comes up a little bit. It's a little bit wider on this side than it is here. A couple striae lines, just a talon shape. Use the black paper to your advantage. Gonna make it look like it's folding over, covered in shadow on that right side. Remember your pressure sensitivity with your additive marks as well as your subtractive marks. If you're pressing down hard with your eraser, it's going to really erase down to black. If you're being light-handed with your eraser, it's going to give you a shade of gray. There's a really faint wedge here that's going to define the edge of my face. And instead of leaving it there, I'm going to connect it back and forth between what I did here, back and forth. And that little bit of shadow here frames her face, shows me how much I screwed up here. If I made a big mistake, I'm going to switch over to my eraser, harder eraser. Try and salvage it. Cheek's a bit wide. Good. Almost. Need that there.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I'll get the rest of stuff down and then I'll put it over. Um, a big chunk of habit over here. Leave a little bit of shadow. Hard edge. Hard edge coming up. And up top, this is where I lost a couple of guys. You got to have something to frame this. So instead of leaving this black, you can either load up your finger and fade out so that it's a really, really soft gray. You can barely see it on the Elmo. You can barely see it on the recording. Something as thin as that works. If you want to do that, go for it. Otherwise, just like a hairline drag that is going to give us the illusion that this is an edge. It's almost a lost edge. It fades almost completely into black. Okay. Where we lost another, I feel like I just say we lose kids all the time. The rhythm method for this shape over here, got a hard edge that comes up and then back down and then back over. If you look at this shadow on the interior of your eye here, it kind of focus on that shape right there. So I have starting here, down, edge of my cheek, starts coming back up here. So that's where I'm going to land. And that's where my brightest highlight is. That line, something like that. And I can drag that up with my finger instead of being too additive. Up with the finger, down from there. There's going to be a ton of highlight here. Load up your finger. Again with fabric, I can leave it like that. It looks good. It's not 100% accurate to the reference. Change in direction. I have a little bit of highlight underneath. That's a little bit darker than what I have up top. The heavenly image. She is top lit. I need to soften that line out. I need to create a harder edge up top. You can use your brush dynamics of your eraser. I've got a longer eraser here. Lay it down flat. That's just going to give me a hard edge. Quite the angle that I want. Finish the habit here. So I've got edge of my cheek, shadow. This makes kind of an S curve. You guys can't see what I'm doing. Make the wedge. And I'm just going to feather that out to the right. From that wedge, it still has a highlight, feathers out a little bit more this way. There's going to be some hard edges here in this foreshadow. Again, take my tougher eraser, comes up a bit, Anytime that we erase out, we definitely want to feather it in. So I erase out there. Add a little bit more highlight if I need to create some folds. Just get into the ballpark of the fold. A lot of this is still covered in shadow. That's really what we want. We want it to be subtle, quick changes in value. Got a hard edge, shadow. Let's frame the edge of the face before we're done here. The habit, this fabric really does a lot of the work for you with the way it thins the face out. In the last few classes, if you don't have like soft edges, that's where it starts to look a little bit more illustrative, a little bit more street arty. Is that bad? No, it's just more stylized. You can keep it like that, or you can do a little bit less stylized and feather out these edges. Huh? It's in here. So where it takes us a long time to Loomis method our face because of all the line work that we do, this is just a quicker way to do it. We still have the Loomis method in the back of our heads, but now we have a very, very dramatic way of presenting a portrait. And in the end, we didn't have to do that much. Okay, it's a lot of analysis. It's a lot of observational drawing. God forbid. We have some subtle shadows, and it tends to be really, really dramatic and beautiful. When we get to a spot somewhere around here, we can use our kneaded eraser to start adding some texture. Just like we did with the eyes, you can create the worm and create some texture in the face. You stipple at it, awesome. Make sure you soften it out. And then we'll start tomorrow with the pencil, get everything softened out, and you guys can start your own low-key high contrast drawing. I will post this on Canvas. Keep your Conti crayons, keep your pastels, keep your black paper. We'll keep working on it tomorrow.